So we have 4 of our professors here tonight that will be answering any questions that you might have and tell you why the MEM is a good program for you to apply to if you haven't done so already. And also to myself, I'm Ramona David. I'm the admissions manager. I think I know the majority of you. So if you have any questions for me later on or after, please feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So again, thank you to our faculty for taking the time out to come in this evening, and of course all of you from taking time out of your schedules to join us this evening. So I'm going to pass this baton to Dr. Gary Wnek, who is our faculty director.
Thanks, Mona. Appreciate it. And thanks to Ramona and Lensa and Sarah and June for all the arrangements this evening. It's great to welcome Dr. Colin Drummond, Assistant Chair in Biomedical Engineering, Dr. Sunniva Collins, Mechanical and Aerospace, and our friend Rob Kenney from the Cleveland Clinic, who's a practitioner in a lot of things that are part of the MEM curriculum. He'll be teaching project management this coming summer. Just a few remarks. I came to CASE in 2004, shortly after this program got underway, but I can share with you a little bit of history over the years and actually what led to the creation of the program in 2002. Basically, in the late 90s, the administration here in the School of Engineering, the CASE School of Engineering and the Weatherhead School of Management, went around the country and asked people in 30-plus companies, people at all levels of management, vice presidents, a couple of CEOs, some middle managers in R&D. What do you want to see from a young engineer? And the metaphor that came out, I'll spare you a lot of the details, was the T-shaped engineer. Technical depth, preeminent importance, but across the top, more breadth. That was the time when the internet was taking off, globalization was really accelerating, innovation was becoming extremely critical, especially with short innovation times, ideas to market, how to accelerate that whole process. So what came out of all that is our MEM degree. It's a 1-year summer, fall, spring joint degree with the Weatherhead School of Management. It's the only MEM that's truly a joint degree. That is, both deans sign the diplomas. We do a lot of very collaborative teaching. We have projects from companies in our courses, like product design that I co-teach. And one thing about our program in the T-shaped engineer metaphor, we're actually raising the bar. The metaphor we like now is the I-shaped engineer, where there's a top and bottom. The vertical is still technical depth, still has to be super strong, but across the top now, we'll call professional breadth. Things like a little bit of finance and accounting, project management, understanding that in product design and delivery to the market, when products fail, it's not really bad engineering. It's rarely bad engineering. It's all the other stuff. Anticipating markets of a size that your eyes were too big for the plate in front of you, and actually it was much smaller. You ran out of money or ran out of time or both before the project finished. All those sorts of things. So that's what the MEM is about. The bottom horizontal, which we've added in the last 3 years roughly, we'll call personal breadth. You as individuals, emotional intelligence, empathy, social awareness, the ability to work in teams. We think that combo in that simple metaphor describes what we do well, what the world wants out of young engineers. So we're excited about the program. We have a great staff, very, very personal, and a lot of opportunities to grow both professionally and personally. So that's the short story on the MEM. The session this evening is to offer answers to questions, a bit of perspective on the MEM. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Colin Drummond. By the way, this is year 11 for me, and it's time to move on to other things. Renewal and change is good. So Colin is bringing a bundle of energy and enthusiasm, and he's also been a friend of the program, teaching, advising, mentoring since 2007. So it's a wonderful time for a transition. So welcome. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much. So what we'd like to do, I have a mic. So what we'd like to do this evening is maybe to sort of get the discussion going by myself and then my colleagues, Rob and Sunniva. We'll each spend about 10 minutes offering a perspective on the MEM program and our involvement. And then we have a couple questions, but that will sort of drive the conversation, and we expect to hear a lot from you and hope that you'll jump in as well. To maybe spend a few minutes talking about how I got to the MEM program and why I'm still involved. I spent 20 years in industry prior to coming to Case Western Reserve in 2008. I left a position at Invacare Corporation as Director of Clinical Research, and it was in the summer of 2007 that my friend and colleague Gary came to me down in my office downtown and said, you know, I'd like you to teach finance. And my first reaction was, having been in industry, I was like, that's fantastic. I love finance. And I think you were surprised at first. And I said, yeah, because at that time I was Director of Clinical Research and I was being at the board level. And what I had discovered through my time in industry was the difference in people that could speak some of the management terms. My role at Invacare was to translate technical opportunities into financial terms so managers could make decisions. So I thought, what a better thing to do. So I did that for a couple years. And but then in 2000, so that was temporary. So in 2008, I joined the university in the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and actually my responsibility was to essentially to run a venture fund for the university. There is the Coulter Foundation. The Coulter program is it's a $20 million program, and we have $1 million a year to invest in projects. And my role in biomedical engineering was to manage the investment fund, of course, working with all the people from industry, clinicians. And once again, I discovered that, as Gary had mentioned, this idea that the failure of a lot of products really didn't have to do with lack of technical acumen. It was more the other things, the finance, the marketing, all these different things that we look at in the MEM program. And so, while I was running that program, I became more and more involved in the MEM program, and I began to enjoy it. So you might say, well, what did you enjoy? What did you see? What did you like? What was it about the MEM program that made me want to become involved as I've been for the 5 years? And just in my own personal experience, like I have chapters of my life. I was in academia, then I went to industry for 20 years, and this becomes my new chapter of my life. I always think about this career development in really 3 steps. I think of, because I used to coach soccer and lacrosse to middle school students, and then at high school as well. And I always think of this early phase where people try to crystallize ideas. They hear things, they talk to their friends, the parents, role models. They try to crystallize. Who am I? What do I want to do? Then later on, as we think about college and where to go to college and what to do, you enter this new phase of specification. Oh, I'm going to be like polymer science, or I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be that. And so you form this specification that, at the outset, you don't really know, what you want to be. And in my case, I got my first degree, by the way, in 1974, and I was trained to be a TV repairman. And I remember saying to my teacher at the time in England, I said, I've got the world by the tail. I know how to replace vacuum tubes like nobody else in this class. And right in front of my eyes, the whole technology vaporized. So I had to learn how to learn. So for me, that specification for the Canterbury College in the UK was just a start, and I've had to evolve. I have to change. I mean, people say, I was just chatting with Patrick about medical devices. Well, you learn and you change. The specification sometimes changes. And so the third phase is the implementation. So you come to the university, you've applied, you've been accepted, you start your undergraduate career, and then maybe the specification changes. As you get to implementation, which to me is the big third phase, the implementation is when you take all of what you've learned and now you're trying to craft a specific career. You're trying to say specifically, what industry will I work for? How will I launch my career? That's the implementation. So to me, the joy is for those individuals that I've had the privilege of working with in the MEM program, the implementation phase involves a lot of discovery. So for me, there's a personal joy in seeing people, I think my colleagues would agree, like halfway through the program, they're transformed, they're energized, they see a new future, and we help them implement. And so that to me, in this chapter of my life where, I'm closer to 60 than I ever want to say, but the point is that, we're at this point where we can help others, and by serving others, it's a joy. And I think the MEM program sort of facilitates that. So when I say I enjoy it, it's not like I'm some power-hungry PhD that gives tests and, cracks the whip, but it's really about this idea of being with people as they make the transformation and sort of the leap to light speed. So that's sort of my 10-minute spiel and why I'm involved and what I do. I teach a variety of courses. I teach the entrepreneurship course, which is not what you think of as entrepreneurship. It's not about starting a business. It's about critical thinking skills. And we do measure and understand how to improve your critical thinking skills through entrepreneurship. We spend 2 semesters together. I also teach clinical information systems, which is now co-taught with the School of Medicine, and I actually teach biodesign, which Gary and I had started, 5 or 6 years ago. Biodesign has been a huge success because the MEM students get to work with School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and people from industry who join the program. So it's been a real joy to actually have this true interdisciplinary activities and to help people walk through that. So with that, I think I'll just turn it over to my immediate left. We'll just start with Rob and then move on to Sunniva. Yes.
Okay. So the question was, how do we get involved in background and all that good stuff? So again, my name's Robert Kenney. I'm part of the Cleveland Clinic. I work as part of the leadership team in the continuous improvement group. We serve all of the Cleveland clinics, or all locations here in Cleveland, as well as Florida, Vegas, and Abu Dhabi, and all the other areas that we have partnerships with. I'm just going to jump to the point. My background is I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to Ohio State. I got my master's of engineering here at Case Western through the engineering department, and then I went to Weatherhead and I got my MBA degree. So once I got done with that was about 10 years ago. I was working and everything, and I was like, hey, I need to give back. I need to get back involved at Case Western. I would have said the same thing with Ohio State, but I was here in Cleveland. But with that said, I joined the Alumni Association, the Alumni Council in the Weatherhead School of Business, and I got a taste of it, and I was like, hey, this is really neat stuff. So my next step was to start sponsoring projects and internships and running programs like that. So I got a little bit more flavor and experience in terms of working with students and trying to give back in that fashion. And then next I got to know some of the faculty in the classes where I was sponsoring projects. And that's how I had the pleasure of meeting Gary and these folks here. Was I voiced, hey, I think I could really help with the class. And they came back, this was 2 years back, and they were like, hey, Dr. Flowers is retiring. Would you be interested in teaching a class? And I was like, definitely. What does that mean exactly? So, so it was a really neat experience. The first year taught 2 sections of Six Sigma quality management. I filtered in a bunch of lean, problem solving, continuous improvement methodologies and thinking. I think we had about 15 organizations that we partnered with in terms of projects. And then from there, the next year, we actually bumped that up to I think about 20 organizations. So manufacturing, healthcare, banking, all different types of industries. And I did that for 2 years. And then I'm honored to say I'll be teaching the project management class this summer. So it's exciting. I think the wild part for me is just working with all these students that their minds are hungry, they have high energy, the diverse backgrounds, not only from where you were raised, but what you're interested in, what sort of sort of turns you on and gets you energized to say, hey, I want to do this. And then, candidly, the really, really neat part, which I don't think I really expected, but it was when you guys graduate, and that I'd say 10-second discussion that says, actually the first student said, hey, Professor Kenney, I'm like, that's cool, but you can call me Rob. But at the end they're like, hey Rob, from what I learned in your class or in this class, I made a career decision. I would have never thought I went that way, and I love it. So that was really cool, and I think the students that I've gotten to know, and I'd say even after they graduate, you still stay in contact. It's amazing where they're at 1 or 2 years from where you're sitting today. And it made a big difference. And the experiences they got were pretty incredible. So that's how I answer that
not that we're getting old, but I think there's this thing where you experience success through others. You know what I mean? Right. You're beyond your own personal success, and you feel it as others experience it. So that's a joy. Yes, Sunniva, please.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for coming this evening. I recognize several people here from classes that I've taught at the university. My name is Sunniva Collins. I'm a professor in mechanical and aerospace engineering. I have only been with the university just under 2 years now. I was telling my daughter on the way over here that basically 20 years ago tomorrow, I started my job at Swagelok Company. And basically, I had finished a PhD at Case in material science and wanted to find a job in manufacturing. So for 18 years, I was employed with Swagelok Company. And in that time period, I actually went through a whole series of jobs. I want to talk about this in terms of Gary's discussion of the I-shaped engineer, because basically what happens in the MEM program, you get very quickly exposure to things that took me 18 years to figure out at Swagelok. I went in as a technical specialist, so I actually had a lot of information, real good depth technically. And then I had to start doing things like figuring out how I was going to buy equipment or get projects moving. So I had to learn about finance and making proposals and making cases for things like that. And so basically, after proving my technical acumen, it was kind of like now I had to prove my business acumen. And that there were some hard knocks there to figure out how do I go about getting things justified and how do I go about, making sure that I can get projects done. And then after I had gone through a certain amount of that, basically I got to a point where I was managing people. And managing technical staff is very different from managing other type of staff. They are technical specialists themselves, and they need special care and feeding in a way, right? But one of the things that was really interesting to me was that was always information that I had kind of just said, well, we'll figure all that out. But it's actually good things to know about how to have interpersonal conversations, relationships with people, understand motivation and everything like that. So it basically took me probably 14 or 15 years to figure out how to be an I-shaped engineer in a manufacturing environment. Now, what was interesting is I have to tell you that manufacturing is actually a great area to be working in. And it's because there are so many interesting engineering challenges and there are so many business challenges. And so the combination of these two things can be really important in terms of figuring out what your skill set needs to be. I have taught in the MEM program since the summer of 2013, shortly after I started at the university as a professor. And I teach the IIME 415 class, which is Materials and Manufacturing. And this is a lot of fun. It's a course where we spend a lot of time talking about basically all of the things that go into building a supply chain, and we visit a lot of manufacturing facilities in Northeast Ohio. We're very, very lucky that we have as many of them here as we do. Last year we visited Alcoa, we visited Eaton, we went to Lincoln Electric, and what's fantastic is in every place we get a complete factory tour where we can walk through and actually see how some of the things that you learn about in these MEM courses, like lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, are being applied by local companies. So that means that when you go into a company, you can recognize it, you see it, and you can say, well, yeah, here's an example of lean manufacturing. I saw that when I went through this factory tour. So it's a great opportunity to basically get that exposure. And then for me, it keeps me fresh in my thinking as I see how different companies are doing things in the area. So I would say has been it's been a lot of fun. It's a little bit different each year because it all depends on who we can get in to go see. But we learn something new at every location. And we're looking at different aspects of the manufacturing supply chain. So that's kind of fun right there. But it does tie in with all of these other classes. I would also like to reflect on some of the things that Rob said, which is about this idea that we're creating a community of scholars too, people that have this training that basically go out worldwide and are doing interesting things in a lot of different businesses. I think that the program, of course, has been around for more than 10 years, and we've had students that go into all kinds of interesting places and do really good work. And that means, of course, that you become part of that group, right? The other thing that's fun is that it is a very international group. We try and make sure that we've got a good balance of students so that we have this opportunity for people to work together on team projects and things like that. So I am a great believer in the value that the program gives to the students that participate in it.
And I think to some extent, just listening to what the two of you said, it's really interesting how each of our careers has evolved and how even with Gary, how we've successfully navigated a lot of things. Like I think each of us had some sense we could be more. So there was that ambiguity, right? So dealing with ambiguity. The one thing that Rob, I think, said was networking. Networking is not something that comes naturally, but this is something we learn and do and exercise in real time. And the other thing I like about the international nature is, in critical thinking skills, one of the most important aspects of critical thinking skills is looking at the problem from 360 degrees. So there's 3 parts of critical thinking skills. 1, evidence-based statements, don't have an opinion, parading as fact. 2nd is looking at the problem from 360 degrees. And the last is to actually be able to create a hypothesis. All of those require certain skill sets, but these are fundamental tenets of a lot of what we do. And this idea of self-directed learning. You would not be where you are today, nor would you, mechanical engineer at the clinic. That's self-directed learning, right? So these are these skills that I think we're aware of. And so let me just touch on this idea of graduate education, if you don't mind. Each one of us has different graduate degrees, some PhDs, some MBAs, some both, whatever. So the idea here is that, tell me a little bit about the decision to go to graduate school. I mean, are there regrets? I mean, I can tell you that my decision to graduate school was very straightforward. I was at University of Buffalo, mechanical engineering. At that time, there was offers all over the place. I went to Electric Boat, I went all over the place. And I remember one of my last interviews, I was sitting there and I was talking to one of the engineers who had supervised me. And he says, well, this is what you're going to do for the next 5 years. And my eyes kind of opened up. So on the plane back, I'm like, I don't know, I want to have fun. So I was like, is this it? And all my colleagues were running off and they had great offers. And so I was talking to a professor and he said, and this is sort of silly, but it's true, he says, you should be part of the family. And I was like, wow, is this Ithaca the mob or something? He says, no, I think you have what it takes to take the next step. And so I went to graduate school and it was enjoyable. So it was fun. And I think the reason it was fun was it was a period of self-discovery for me in that 3rd phase of implementation. I said, okay, I have a clearer picture of what I want to do. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you want to reflect on your graduate and how you got there and what you did and things like that.
Oh, all right. Well, I didn't go back to graduate school directly. I actually went and worked for 5 years. So just like the guy at Electric Boat, this is what you're going to be doing for the next 5 years. I actually had that experience, and at the end of it, I was like, I have to do something different now. And it was very interesting. I applied and I got into CASE in material science and engineering, and I will tell you that the 5 years of graduate school were some of the most enjoyable that I had. And a lot of it is that you really are focused very much on something that you want to work on, and there aren't any other real distractions. You can spend a lot of time on what you want to do. So I had a great time. So for me, it was, in a way, it was remediation. It was my remedial learning was to go back and get my graduate degree.
Paradoxically, it's most successful, it might seem, when you're extraordinarily self-centered. This is your time, this is your period, and you don't want to be distracted. But on the other hand, you have to learn team building. I don't want to talk about your...
So a little more of my background. As Colin shared and I shared, so I'm a mechanical engineer. So out of undergrad, I went and worked for a nuclear company. And we were on a lot of contract work, I traveled, and I didn't like radiation. So I was like, okay, I can't work for this company anymore, right? So then I actually moved back to Cleveland. I was in Virginia, I came back to Cleveland area, and I joined a company that manufactures, designs, builds, distributes heavy-duty trailer truck suspension systems. And that's where a lot of I argue, a lot of my foundational training was obtained, but also it was a very innovative organization, thought-provoking, well-run private business. 4 guys started it with, I think they were credit cards. And, I think it grew over close to $750 million company. So a pretty good, success story. And then during that, I'm like, they had an educational reimbursement program. I was like, oh, that's perfect for me. Because I was still paying my undergrad off. So I started and I got involved in my master's program right here. And some of my electives, I love the engineering side, but I got really excited when I took the business classes and saw how they worked in tandem. And it really drove me to say, okay, when I got done with that, one of the guy who sat next to me in the next office, he was actually just started his MBA here. And I was talking to him, I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. So I think I went to one of the classes, and I think maybe a month later I applied, and then once I graduated, I started that right away. But I think for me personally, it was just, that sense of, remember the whole knowledge is power commercials, I mean, that just, made a lot of sense to me. And then from my family roots, our family, first generation, was probably the ones that had the opportunity to go to college. So I'm like, I'm not passing this up, right? So then I just continued to do the education thing, and it I think it gives you so much experience, knowledge, and sort of makes you unique in terms of what you're interested in, and you backed it up with that education. And the network is, I would say, pretty incredible. So one thing that helped me coming here was, one of the job requirements was, okay, well, you have to go find projects for 120 students, right? So I naturally gravitated to, oh, wow, I know all these people in Cleveland and surrounding area. So that was sort of really fun for me. But I would say, to your point about time, do it now. And, I think the benefits, you may not know it the first year or second year, but when you're sitting in our chairs, you're going to be going, wow, that was well worth it. And just the experiences, and you can go anywhere from this point.
Interesting is that, the diversity of different backgrounds, what you find is that whether you're in polymer or electrical or mechanical, what you're going to find is that you begin to abstract certain skills that can be repurposed. And that's one of the signs of a leader. So I used to work for the executives at Invacare. I worked for Mel Mixon and Jerry Blau. And it was really interesting how they would take lessons from one area and repurpose it. It was just totally fascinating. So so that's something that comes out of it. The other thing that I think is transformational and happens to a lot of people is, I remember when I first started in graduate school, I had to give a lot of presentations, and I was doing some teaching, which to me, in the MEM program is sort of equivalent to the commercialization associate. You're out as an advisor, you're there as a consultant. And I remember I was always so nervous teaching. I mean, you look at me now and you'd say, how could he be nervous? But I was like petrified. I would stand up there, and I remember the day I was at Syracuse University, I was walking across the quad, and I said, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the stress. I'm sick of worrying. Screw it. I'm going to go enjoy. And so I just spoke from the heart, and the students were like, what happened to you? And I said, I was tired of the stress. But the point is, my point in that is, the university becomes the safest place to try new personalities, new aspects of your career and yourself. You get to explore, again, in the safest environment. And look at the commercialization program. That's been going on for 10 years. So maybe you want to be a consultant, maybe you want to do this, maybe you want to do that. But the commercialization associate gives you the opportunity to go into industry and sort of play out that role, right? Play out that role, visit the companies or go back to the companies. And so that's extraordinarily powerful. So I use this word repurposing, and I'm sort of curious, if we think of the true customer in this case as your target company or the industry you're going to work in, you know what I mean? And you think of this, the services you provide, as a leader. So in your mind, because you were at SwageLock for a long time and you're at the clinic, so you hear what executives say. What do you think? What do they say? What do they say about what they're looking for? And you know how you have discussions about, oh, that person we could advance or not. What do they say? What do they talk about?
They want a team player. They definitely want somebody who, and it's very interesting because different companies have different things that they look for. I know that at SwageLock, one of the things that they were always looking for was, is this somebody who's played on a basketball team? And part of that is because if you've played basketball, you're used to the idea that you may not be the one taking the shot, but you've got to be there basically for the rebound, and you've got to be there in order to be able to pass the ball to somebody who does have the opportunity to take the shot. So it's this whole idea about being quick on your feet, and then also understanding that you have to share the credit and things of that sort. So team, and I would say that the fact that we go through so many projects in this coursework, where there are a lot of teams and a lot of opportunities to pass the baton, that it makes a big difference.
And there's a struggle there that's worth entertaining, and that is to say, how can I feature my own performance, yet at the same time recognize the team? So this is a dilemma. So in my mind, dilemmas involve compromise, problems have solutions. So this is a dilemma. And this is a team player. Before I turn it over to Rob, I just want to tell you, when I was at Goodyear Aerospace in the 80s, and we'd interview candidates, I was on the interview team. I remember we had to choose one day between two candidates. One had maybe not so stellar grades. The other one had, A grades. And so we were sitting around talking, and so somebody said, well, why would we hire this guy? He was a golf caddy. And the senior VP said, because he could talk to anybody. And that's what we need, is a great team player. And it was really funny because you think about it, and he could deal with ambiguity. So needless to say, we hired this guy, and we could go anywhere with him, and he could chat it up and talk, but he bred a sense of a team and inclusion, which was sort of joyful. So I don't know if you want to comment about what you hear at the executive suite for you.
So I think it's an interesting question. So, at the end of the day, whether you're interviewing for a job, whether you're working on a team, whether you're leading a group, what's the key? The key is you achieve some goal or objective, right? So I think what's really, really interesting in my experience with the MEM students and program is you're looking for someone that's thoughtful, that can interact well with people, leaders, whether they're executives or mid-managers or frontline team members. But I think it's sharpening the skills that you already have a little bit more, so it's a little sharper. And then to have more experiences, I think one of the benefits of the MEM program is all the work that you do. Not only in the classroom, but I think the project load that you have, I think you're going to come out a little bit more sharp, experienced, and I think to a hiring manager or an organization, you're ready. At that point, you're ready. And I'm not saying that just because I'm sitting on the panel. I can think of probably 50 students that I've met over the last 2-3 years that I already know they are highly valued team members where they're at today. And I would give credit to the MEM program and what they learned in those interactions and the experience they gained, from all those different projects.
An interesting point there is that my observation is that the peer learning is powerful too. Some students learn from each other. Some learn that they can instruct others, and others learn from their colleagues. But I'm going to ask the audience for questions, so get them ready while I tell this short vignette. When I started my second company, it was a medical products company for the Braille, and I raised about $2 million, and so I was pretty proud of that. And so I had the good fortune of, I actually had the good fortune of working with a guy by the name of Bob Schmidt. And Bob Schmidt says, make the call. And I was sort of like, this is when I was first trying to get money from investors. And I was like, oh. So somebody said, well, why don't you call David Morgenthaler? So he's the venture capitalist in the country, right? He's the big guy. He's the one that invested in Apple and others. So, other people said, how naive of you to call David Morgenthaler. Google his name someday and you'll know what I mean. So I left a message and I said, Mr. Morgenthaler, I just want 10 minutes of your time. I have a couple questions. And people said, you'll never hear. He's like the rock star of VC. He's like it in the world. So one day I'm sitting at my phone in Highland Heights in my office, and I get the call. He says, this is David, you got 10 minutes. And I said, so I was happy to get the call. And so I was like, can I come? He says, no. You said 10 minutes, you got 10 minutes, start talking. And I was like, the harsh reality of investors. So we were talking, and then he says, okay, you can come see me. So the point is, I go down to see him, and I'm talking about the technology, and he goes, Colin, you're uninvestable. I was like, I said, I was going to argue the PhD, I was going to argue all this experience. He says, you're uninvestable. He says, because I have been in this business decades, okay? You've been in it 2 years. And he said, the projects and the products, like you were mentioning, you have it's like a horse race. And this came from David Morgenthaler. You have the jockey, which is the manager. You have the horse, which is the product. And you've got the race, which is the market. And he says, hundreds of millions of dollars of investments later, I can tell you that 90% of the time, the failure in every single product is the jockey. He says, because when we make investments, we know you're wrong with the pro forma. We know you're wrong with the market analysis. We know you're wrong. We need to know, and we invest in the person who can guide us through the path and take us to the future. So that stuck with me, and then it was a joy to continue to work with him over time. So we've talked a lot. I wouldn't say that's typical, but in any case, so share with us your thoughts. What are your questions, concerns, comments, reactions? Yes, please.
So we have Rahman Bola. He's from Ohio, and he wants to know what differentiates MEM program from the MBA program, and it's directly towards you, Dr. Colin.
Oh, to me. Well, thank you. Rob, could I defer to Rob? So I'll just say I have a very simplistic view of this. And it's simplistic because my primary experience has been as an engineer in industry, and then later on when I did a lot of international work. So I had the good fortune when I worked for Nordson Corporation, I did large-scale manufacturing systems installation in China, India, South Africa, and then Europe. So these are large, multi-million-dollar production systems, and so I think something Gary said resonates very much with this. Yes, I had to have managerial skills to navigate the culture, to make decisions, to understand the accounting, but at its core, I had to have technical credibility. I don't think I could have negotiated the way I did if I didn't have the technical credibility. Now, do I have an MBA? Yes, I do. Because at the time, 1990s, the idea was that, well, if you wanted any managerial skills, get the MBA. And so I did get the MBA. So to me, they're slightly different animals. They're slightly different things. So I think the MBA I think it helps people develop all sorts of operational skills, financial skills, accounting and marketing. But I find the Masters of Engineering and Management, emphasis and, blends uniquely those. So for instance, let's take Entrepreneurship. This isn't just an entrepreneurship course, it's technology entrepreneurship. We focus on intellectual property. We focus on facets that have a heavy technical bias. So I think the idea is that if you like science, but you don't want to be a scientist, the MEM could fold into that. There is a difference in the MBA and the MEM, and I think actually by getting the MEM, if I'm not wrong, at some point you could move on and get the MBA, right? So it's an accelerated. So there's slightly difference in the emphasis, but the emphasis is more vivid to the technologist than it is to, say, the MBA. I don't know, you want to comment? You've got an MBA, right?
Yeah. So when I got my master's and actually, when I got my master's, the MEM program wasn't set up yet. There's sort of like a pre-pilot, let's say.
You're off the hook.
Yeah. So I'd say the difference is this. I'd say everybody in this room, if I talk to you in 10 minutes, I would probably say you're going to be more technical than I'm going to say average. I won't tell you what the standard deviation is, but what the average MBA student would be. And I would almost even say your backgrounds and what you're interested in doing, not only today, but tomorrow, would be a little different, okay? So if you're sitting here, you have a strong engineering background, you love engineering, you're interested in leadership, you want to be more than, I hate saying this, than just the engineer on the team, but you want to be a thought leader and someone that just continually wants to learn in life, then you're in the right spot.
Let me add something really quickly there, because you said something and I don't want to lose the thought. So when I was out working internationally and I filled a passport, they sewed in an insert and I almost filled that. I remember when it became clear to me that there's no way I could have negotiated deals. There's no way I could have negotiated if I didn't have the core technical knowledge, because the key in a lot of these activities is, what is the question? What are the questions to ask? That will differentiate people who ask good questions that can get at the essence of what the problems or the issues are. The ability to ask questions, I think it's fundamentally different if intrinsically you understand technology and you know how to articulate. It's almost in the DNA. You know, it's not make-believe, it's not an imposter, you know, it's in the DNA in terms of technical. I don't know, what do you think?
Oh, I'm absolutely with you there, Colin. I mean, I look at the MEM as it's definitely leadership development. It's with the idea that you are aiming to be in a pretty high-level leadership position in a company at some point. And it is because of the basis in technology, because if you don't have that, you can't help make good decisions for an organization about how they should invest their money. If you don't understand the technology, you're just sitting there counting numbers.
And I'll recite this story because it's actually something I was totally stunned by it. So sometimes people get in the program and there's a lot of work and there's a lot of creative frustration, I'll call it. And I remember there was some students that were really upset about entrepreneurship, the way I was teaching it, because the way I teach entrepreneurship, it's about critical thinking skills, it's about dealing with ambiguity and self-directed learning. So it's not about starting the company, it's about entrepreneurship in the true sense of someone engaged in business. It's not about sort of the standard thing. And so I remember essentially one of the students said, "I think this is rubbish," you know, in so many words. And so earlier this last fall, I got an email from this particular person, and she wrote, "I regret my words because now that it's been 5 years, I can't believe how much I use this every single day." And we hear this, she would be pleased, Priyanka Chatterjee is someone else. You would know from her class, she was very vocal about, is this right? Are you doing the right thing? And I just got an email from her, I guess maybe a month ago, same thing. She goes, "Wow, I can't believe it." So some of this requires a leap of faith. You know, I'm using words like ambiguity, self-directed learning, and you're thinking, oh man, you know, isn't there something better to do in life? You know, what's this all about? But the fact is, these are elements of fundamental change in the way you think, you know?
I was going to say too, don't be surprised. The program can make you very uncomfortable. because you're going to be forced to think about yourselves too, and evaluate yourselves internally, and find out what your compass is and what is true north for you. And that's a hard thing for an engineer, because we're so busy solving problems and looking at the external world and trying to do things that way that we don't take the time to sit down and really evaluate ourselves and where we can be better and where we can learn more and where we can stretch and grow.
I think we do a great job pushing you outside your comfort zone. I have chalk talk in my class where I pick somebody and I say, guess what? And we actually get a room with the board and chalk, and I say, it's your turn to teach. And it's like, I'm like, but if you're sitting at the board, I mean, I remember when I was at Invacare, if you didn't have an answer and you couldn't stand up and say something, you weren't invited back. So this is about being invited to the table. The other thing we do is we have networking day. I think it's important, and it scares most people. So we have one evening off, and you have to go network. You have to have a plan, you have to have outcomes, and people get so worked up about it, but when they do it, they're like, they had this sense of accomplishment. I don't know what your thoughts are, but networking is everything, I think, in many ways.
I'm sitting here, another question I'm going to throw out to everybody is, who likes to be told what to do in this room? Let me see a show of hands. Okay, so the reason I ask that is, there's a reason you're here tonight, okay? It's to learn about the program, but it's also you're doing some, I'd say, self-discovery and figuring out, okay, what's my next step? But there's very few people that I've met, not only in this program, but that have gone for an advanced degree, that have probably thought back and said, you know what, I shouldn't have done that. So I think A is, do you want to continue that learning path? And then number two would be, what's going to make you happy? And you don't have to fully answer that, but I think you got to have a directional pointer that's going to get you close to it, right? You don't want to end up somewhere like, oh, what was I thinking? But I think no matter what your path is, I hope it's that MEM path, but you're going to continually grow and stretch yourself. And then I like the self-discovery part, because if you're not thinking about it now, that organization's thinking about it on day one. Where do you fit? What are your strengths? How do they get along with people? What is their value add when they come to work on the first day? Meaning, what can they actually do on day one?
Isn't it better to find out about that while you're here in this nice environment, which is safe, rather than going into a work environment and then making that really serious mistake that basically takes you off of a leadership track in some cases? I've seen that happen with engineers where they come in, and because they've got a certain personality and they're pushy, sometimes it'll be another 5 years before they're considered for an assignment.
Timing, too.
Yeah.
It's about timing, because some people say, oh, it's another year. But the fact is, there's either creative frustration, there's something within you that says, I need more time. And the fact is, statistically, people go back to school after 4 or 5 years for different reasons. And so I think there's distractions of real life that come into play, and so timing becomes everything. Other questions that are out? Yes, please.
This one's for Dr. Collins.
All right.
You said earlier. Oh, okay, sure.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this one is for you, Dr. Collins. You said earlier that in your experience in the work industry, managing technical staff you found was very different from managing regular staff. Right. Can you describe, specifically how it was different to manage technical staff as opposed to regular workers?
I managed technical staff at Swagelok. I had the materials technologists answering to me for a while, and then after I did that, they moved me into a group where I was managing a group of compliance engineers. And these were people who had very significant backgrounds themselves. One of them had actually been a Navy commander, which meant not only had he been in the Navy and he'd worked his way up, he basically had a whole fleet responding to him before he left the Navy and then came and took a position. I had to be very cognizant of the fact that he knew a lot of things that I didn't know, that he had skills that I didn't have, and that I had to be respectful and responsible for his success as well as my own. And that's a little different than when you're managing a group of people that might be doing accounting functions or something like that, or HR functions. But when you're talking about people that have had to go through kind of, significant technical learning and to become specialists in what they do, they take a different type of care and feeding. And a lot of it is this idea of I have to be responsible for making sure that they know that they're respected and that they're able to perform at their highest level. Does that answer your question, you think? Or
Can I add to that
Yeah.
a little bit? So I like the words about the technical specialty. Most engineers have spent 16 years of their life computing the wrong answer to 3 significant digits, and they're proud of this. They're very proud of this. So to question and prod them to move in a different direction requires a degree of credibility. So this is really about building credibility, and I would venture to say that this idea of how you can manage a technical person without the technical credibility, it's a real challenge. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think to build upon what you guys both said, the part I would add is trying to understand what your role is as a leader, and then who's on your team. Again, going back to goals and objectives, right? Because that's what it's about. And who can help you achieve those goals and objectives, as well as how do you give others the opportunity to do what they, back to my point of being happy, doing what they really enjoy and what their strengths are, but at the same time ensuring that they have opportunities to grow. Again, it depends on the organization's culture, right? Like if you're expected to grow and develop and mature and things like that. So it's trying to balance all those things, and at the same time being responsible for whatever area you're managing or directing. So, but I think you get to a point in your career where you know where your core competencies are and what you're really good at. And people will naturally, I think, gravitate towards you because they're really interested in that and they have a passion for it. And then I think you return that in turn as well. But then, there's at times, I hate to say it, there's times when you have people on your team that, maybe aren't performing to expectations and things like that. So I think it's balancing all those different roles as a leader and then trying to continually build yourself, right? Because you're trying to build your own skills and experience and know-how. But I think the leadership part is really important. And there might be a handful of you in this room that say, you know what, after 10 or 15 or 20 years, hey, I like being the technical expert, right? So this idea of like, well, I can grow as a leader, or wow, I could grow as a technical person and still be a leader, right? So I think that's the exciting part. So I think what you're looking at tonight is only going to continue to take you down that path and to give you, I'd say, the skills and experience. And this is just part of your journey, right? But I think it's an important part as you go down that road.
And one more thought before we entertain the next question. I think this idea you talked about, essentially, when do you coach? When do you fire? When do you take somebody who's highly competent and enjoys their job, and you've got a task that needs to be done? This is what we call take one for the team. Take somebody who's going to be moved outside their domain. So there's a lot of emotional intelligence. There's a lot of skills specific to technology for coaching. And when do you stop coaching? I worked for a company where we said, coach for 6 months and then we're done. They make the jump to light speed or they don't. So this is all part of that. So interesting point. Other questions, please. Yes, please. Sir? Yes, right there.
Right here.
Oh,
Right here, Colin.
yes, please.
Okay, there you go.
Hi. I was actually, I had 2 questions.
Sure.
That's all right. All right. I guess my first is, I recently interviewed a faculty here, Dr. Tyler, and something he said to me, found it quite interesting. He said, in school they teach you to always, be right, learn it right, get it right on the exam. And he said that, when you go to research, you're going to fail 98% of the time. And, that kind of got me thinking, in all these management positions, there's going to be a lot of failure. I know that, you get taught to avoid that failure. But eventually, I feel like you're gonna face that sometime. So, I guess my first question is: does this program, adequately teach you how to fail and how to treat it?
So let me. Do you want?
No, go.
So, I find the concept of failure somewhat interesting, and we do address this. Often the idea of failure is something you put upon yourself. It's the criteria that you set. You did not achieve the goals you want. There's a couple ways of looking at this. One of them is to say that we did not get the outcome desired. I need to change my strategy. I need to iterate. So it's many people think of failure as a terminal event. But in fact, there's a way of looking at it as if you are doing something valuable, truly valuable, you won't be right all the time. And you need to figure out what's right or wrong. So I'm going to turn to Rob, but I'm going to make a suggestion about this. I'll turn. Is that Rob works in a very complex organization, and he's trying to improve quality and do all these things. You've got perioperative care, you've got supplies, you've got home care. You may not always get it right. So if my opinion would be for Rob, if he viewed every sort of outcome as less than perfect as a failure, you'd be so disappointed. You have to simply say, what was the metric? How far away? While some people may view it as a failure, keep at it, keep at it. You just persistence. And the key of where I think what we do help you with is don't take it personally. I think when you personalize it, that's the downward spiral. I don't know, you want to comment?
I do, and this is a little bit different. With the first thing you said when you're talking about failure, I started to think about Rudyard Kipling and the poem If, where he says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. The whole point is there is really no such thing as a failure. We are all on some sort of a learning journey. And basically what happens is we find out, well, that didn't work, so what do we do now? So you try something else. So it's really this whole idea of exploration. I would also say that there's a big difference when you are taking on your studies and you go into it with a growth mindset versus a set mindset. The growth mindset is basically, it takes a look at all of these things and says, what have I learned from that and how do I use that to move to the next level? So even when something doesn't work out, and again, because you've set your conditions up in such a way that you're saying this failed, it's like, well, no, actually it didn't fail, it's just that it didn't work the way I thought it was going to.
And a particular way to frame this is, remember, the word I heard you say, Dr. Tyler talked about research. Remember, research is an open territory, a lot of ambiguity. So if you take the mindset that I'm going to take a statics problem for deflection of beam and somehow this is going to be the same, really what you're doing is you're venturing into a domain where there's ambiguity, and your ability as a leader to carve out some certainty and some direction, I think, is directly this ability to set goals and try to achieve and understand iteratively. Most things in life are accomplished iteratively. Right. So, it's my sense. Design is iterative, right? Yep. Yeah. Second question?
Yes. My second question kind of deals with, if you have a goal of perhaps having your own startup or something of the sort, does this program give you all the necessary skills? I know that you need some solid background on econ and all these other areas that are sort of your tools that you're going to use at one point or the other, even if you do hire individual people to take care of those.
So let me speak to that. Do you want to? Okay. So I haven't been with the program forever, but in this case, I have to agree with Scott Shane from the School of Management, who's done a lot of writing on entrepreneurship, and he studied these issues. I would have to agree that, for instance, even in my own case, I worked for a large company for 10 years, started a company, went back to some more. I believe in his idea that the most successful entrepreneur is one where you've been in the industry, learning from others in the industry, and know the industry for at least 10 years. Then when you start the company, you have the context. you have the context. So this is important in being successful, because remember, yes, statistically, I think we have maybe 1 or 2 people a year want to start a company, and I'm pleased in another program I have somebody who's going to start a company. So they want to start, but I think most people tend to gravitate towards working for a firm where they can understand the domain that they're about to go to. But do we offer the skills? Let me tell you, I actually believe that if you subscribe to the idea that the successful entrepreneur is one that knows how to be engaged in business, yeah, we teach that. Do we offer the finance? Yeah. Will we teach you about pro formas? Of course we will. Will we tell you about managing people? Yes, we will. The skills are there. The question becomes, you as an individual with your personal goals, can you weave this story together? And what is your objective? So I think of 3 levels of thinking, and I don't mean to be too philosophical, but I think of this level 1 understanding where data plus understanding is information, and that becomes like the first year of college. Then you mix information plus context, that's knowledge. So what we craft over the year is this context. We take it to the next level. Then once you leave, and I talked about this idea of implementing your career, then you have this knowledge plus insight is wisdom. That comes after many, many years. So will we provide you to take information plus context to create knowledge? Absolutely, and that knowledge can be used to start a business, and they do. You know, we had some students, 2 years ago, very frustrated over energy startups, and a guy went to Florida and did some green building thing, and so he learned a lot and went to work for a large company after that, but that's okay. But the answer, in my opinion, yes. But it really is not about what we're doing for you. It's about how you personally weave together the concepts to create your own future. I can't tell you what your future is.
The only thing I would add to that is, again, what do you really love to do? Where's your passion? Where's your energy? If you just come in this program and just sort of float by, you're going to float by. The students that really stood out to me were the ones that were engaged in the classes, took leadership roles, led the projects. Were true, not only leaders, but also thought leaders to engage not only the other students, but everybody in the class and the program and the organization. So I think it's really comes back to you, not to throw it back at you, but where's your passion? What are you looking for? And I like the idea of weaving it.
Let's use a very specific example. Last year, Reza, you know Reza, he's a fantastic student, sharp, high grades, the whole 9 yards. And right around, I want to say the November, December time, we push hard. Start interviewing, networking, let's get this going. We're not waiting until February for you to start your job hunt. And so I remember Reza, and he and I have talked about this, and he presented this in class, so I'm okay sharing it on video. But the point is that Reza, I was like, Reza, you're the sharpest guy I know. He was a CA. People loved him. He was a good networker. He did everything. And I said, why aren't you getting the jobs? And he's like, well, I interviewed and this. So one day we sat down, it was a Saturday, and I said, what is it you want? And he says, what I really want to do is start my own company. But I just don't know how to do that. I don't know if I have what it takes. So, we were like, network. So he networked away, found somebody in June of last year, and he's like the chief R&D guy, and he's having the time of his life. So in his case, it wasn't about him starting a company. It was about partnering with somebody else that had like-minded. But mind you, this person he's partnering with has 15, 20 years of medical device experience, and they're very successful. I see him, he's like a cheery, happy kind of guy. So again, in his own case, he just knew something wasn't right, but he had people to talk to and reflect on, this is the direction. And I said, so I remember the day he said to me, he came to my office at the time I was in the School of Nursing. He says, I have an offer from a large company and I have our answer with the startup. And I said, Reza, what are you doing in my office? You know the answer. Let's not have this discussion. I said, go for the startup. He says, yeah, I will. Okay, great. Other questions, please. Yes, please. And then you, ma'am, okay?
Part of what makes the CASE MEM program so amazing is that it's adaptable and it transforms as time goes on. And a lot of us, if we apply, won't be in the program for 1, 2, or maybe even 3 years. What's something in the very near future that each of you would like to see change in the MEM program to improve it overall?
I have specific thoughts, but I talk way too much. Go ahead, Sunniva. You want me? Here's what I think. Just personal opinion, and I'm very biased. So Gary might want to chip in on this. Yeah. So this was a very strong lockstep program, and I think Gary mentioned that. And then one of the ways it morphed was to allow for more electives. So we did some things like, we cut short statistics because that's a technical thing, in my opinion, that students can learn if they want. And so we offered electives, and then, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there was this strategic push for biomedical. And of course, I show up on the scene and I propagate it with my clinical information systems and biodesign and things like that. And I think that one of the things we're doing that I think is very good is we've developed this relationship with the Great Lakes Energy Institute, and we're actually offering more versatility in these strategic thrusts. So now, what's coming up in the next year, we're probably going to have our first offering for energy design, which is a takeoff of biodesign. And it's about the art of innovation in energy sciences. So I think that when we reach out to our colleagues here at the university, we come up with some ideas. And so I think what's coming down the pike, I think, is becoming ourselves a little bit more diverse, in terms of some of the unique, and I do mean unique, electives that can be offered. So that's one thing I see coming. Anything else? Did you want to add anything to that? Or?
I think that's a good summary. One other thing, Colin used the term commercialization associate. I think a lot of you know what that means, but in case you don't, it's a paid internship that's optional within the program. We started, I think we piloted in 2007. So one thing you might notice about the curriculum is all of our core courses are Monday through Wednesday. So it's pretty intense. But that leaves Thursday and Friday to intern. And many of our students, since 2007, elect to do that. So that's a relatively recent add-on. And we think it's a wonderful way to take the coursework, the personalization, what you learn in class projects out into the world where you're getting paid. This has nothing to do with the curriculum. You are basically a consultant for hire with a company, and it's a wonderful add-on. The personalization is one. We're thinking also about more international opportunities, to speak to the question, what would be next? Because we're 1 year, not a lot of breaks. I mean, there's a 2.5-week break between the summer term and the start of our fall term. There's the Christmas, New Year's holiday break, and then there's spring break. But within those, are there opportunities for short internships in international locations? So that's one thing that we've talked about and actually experimented with. Professor Lax in chemical engineering took 11 of our MEMs to Myanmar December of 2013, right after finals, or actually during finals. Sorry, Rob, you're right. It's, it was, right. He had to take yours a few days early, at least the ones that went. They spent 2.5 weeks and talked about and worked with students in Myanmar, which is a country that for 50 years was basically in isolation, technically, culturally, from the rest of the world. And 11 of our MEMs went there to talk about and teach technology entrepreneurship. And what a wonderful opportunity.
That section was derived from the course that I had created, and I have the good fortune, I really do mean good fortune, of teaching for a week every year at the University of Rouen in Rouen, France. And so we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to expand what it meant by technology and healthcare? And we didn't have enough people to make it go. But then when I talked to Dan Lax, it's like, this could be done anywhere. So I think some things we don't want to change. I think the experiential learning that comes with a CA is very powerful. I'll use the case of my own own son who went through the program last year. He did his CA at a corporation, and he was convinced at the outset, this is where I want to work. I hope they offer me the job. Okay? I want to tell you, 6 months later, he's like, whoa, did I make a mistake? He got a job in a different field, and now he's really happy. So the point is, you can validate or invalidate some notions, and you're not stuck, trying to switch jobs. And so I want to turn to you, ma'am, because you had a question.
So you've talked a lot about the skill set that you gain through the program. So my question is, when an employer sees an MEM degree from you, what does that mean in the workforce? How well of a program is it known compared to an MBA to someone who hasn't been through the program?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. I have an answer too, but go ahead.
On that, just from my my experience since 2004. When I first got here, I would go to a career fair like was held this past Monday and go in advance of MEM applicants with their resumes and talk to companies about the MEM because it was rather unknown. One thing I found is in 90 seconds, if you get the elevator pitch right, they understand. A second thing I've learned in the intervening 10 years is that more and more of the tables and displays staffed with people from industry are MEMs. So it's less important to do the advance walk around and explain what it is. It's starting to explain itself. Surely it's not as well known as MBA, but again, people who hear the pitch and taking a BS level engineer and adding what we've been talking about, they get it, and they say, some with experience say, that was never around when I was a student and I wish it were, that kind of thing. So anyway, it's things, just history and years of graduates are making a difference. So it's actually an easier sell than it was, and I never found it a hard sell to begin with. It's just there are many more out there now. So.
Let me add to that. I think there's no question that the lay person would understand MBA because it's been around a long time. But when so I think that the brand of the MEM is emerging. More and more universities offer this type of program, but I think this comes back to I have the very good fortune, I really do mean that. I work with a lot of companies, I place a lot of students, and I hear from recruiters all the time. And I want to tell you 3 questions the recruiters ask every single time that if you appreciate this, when you're in front of them, you can, they don't invest in the degree. They're investing in you as a manager. And so they'll ask questions to figure out, who are you? The degree gets you to the table. The degree doesn't guarantee the job. So MBA, PhD, you name it. It's something that, so there's 3 things that employers ask me all the time, and I just spoke with one in the last week, and 2 out of the 3 questions were there. Number 1, believe it or not, do they show up on time? People who are not, and it's not about, oh, they were 3 minutes late. It was about, does this person have a sense of time, schedule, value? Do they appreciate the fact they just can't waltz in? It's about an attitude. It's not so much 2 minutes after. They always want to know, will they show up on time? And I know from my manufacturing that a lot of people don't. So the second question they'll ask is, can I put them in front of a customer? Would you hire this person and put them in front of a customer? Because a lot of times when people have the Masters of Engineering and Management, they're being asked to go outside the comfort zone. The company doesn't pay you what they pay you, and the pay can be fantastic. They're not paying you for the average person. They want to put you in a place where you can represent, can I put you in front of the customer and not worry about what you're going to do? And the last thing that they often ask, this comes up, I want to say a little bit more than half the time, is what do they do when they don't know the answer? I mean, and the reason for that is, if they were going to hire somebody to give them answers to routine questions, they're not going to pay you what they pay you. You know, you can go out and pick up people for 40 or 50 grand if you knew, you know, the routine questions. You know, it's like Rob Kenney at the clinic. I'm sure you're facing new things all the time. What do you do when you don't know? And this comes back to self-directed learning. How do you know how to solve the problems of the future that we don't even know today? And that's where the value is. I'll never forget the guy, Tony, whatever his name is, graduated from Tony from the MEM program. What? No, different Tony. A couple years ago, everybody was shocked. Yeah. Started at 105. And people were like, you know, how is that possible? Remember, Tony was a guy where you could put him in front of a customer and say, this guy can make decisions. So I want to come back to one of the things you talked about is, you know, I used to sit at the board table, the boardroom with the executives at Invacare, and I remember there was a vice president who really annoyed me a lot. And I asked Mel Mixon one day, I said, Mel, you know, I won't use his name, what is it with X? You know, what do you like about him? Don't you find him annoying? And he goes, well, of course I do. Everybody does. But the fact is, he can make decisions, and I can feel comfortable with those decisions. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? So they're paying for this ability to go into the unknown and make decisions. You know what? If you want a secure job where the answers are rote, you know, there's a bunch of those jobs out there. That's not what we're training for. We're training people to go way outside the comfort zone. And I don't know, you want to comment? Because you're.
I was just going to throw in, I mean, I think what you're going to get out of this is really good understanding of who you are and where hopefully your interest is. It may not the field or industry, but like, hey, I'm really good in this sort of type of work, right? And I think the other thing is you're going to give, hopefully you're going to, through all this, the company work and the class work, you're going to develop critical thinking skills to not only think on your feet, but think as a team, apply methods that probably today you don't know about, or you don't have any expertise in that area. And you know, you're going to round out your knowledge and experience. And I think, you know, people that are coming to hire the MEMs aren't hiring, I would say, the MBAs, and they're not hiring the undergrads.
Yeah,
So
I'll speak because
Yeah.
I can say this because it's my own son. So he went on this job interview, and my advice to him was don't screw it up. But in any case, the idea was that so the first thing is, you know, everybody said, well, how did you become aware of the job? And he didn't do the job boards. And so my wife and I were freaking out because it's like, I don't know, it was like March, and Jesse hadn't done anything. And he's like, don't worry, you people. And so then April came, and he networked intensively, found this position, went on the job interview, and then they said, well, you'll hear back from us. And there was like Stanford and Michigan, all these places there. And he was like, yeah, whatever. So he's there, and he gets the call at the airport. They said, we talked about it. They said, you know, we might as well just offer you the job now. So he wasn't like that, and he didn't have that capability at the outset. But through the product development, through being, I mean, I will tell you as his father, he was pushed way outside his comfort zone. I mean, he would not talk, he wouldn't do this, but it was like, boom, you know, one day he's like, you know, I got to do this. And so he did, and it worked out. We have time for questions further. Yes, please, you, sir. Oh yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
My question is quite straightforward. Could you point out the advantage to choose Case or to stay in the Northeast Ohio?
No.
Probably not.
So let me answer that, and then because I have thoughts on that. You know, there's a fellow from Rochester who has interviewed with a lot of universities, a lot of them. He's extraordinarily smart, great GPA. He could go wherever he wanted, and so we got on the phone and we were talking, and this is and he's like, you know, there's something I sense in Cleveland that's a little bit different, and it's a culture and a community. So it's not just about Case. it's where Case is immersed. You know, within 100 miles, you got manufacturing. You could, in half an hour or 45 minutes, you could go everywhere from steel to manufacturing to medical products. It's a great place as a testing ground for all your thoughts. I don't know. Comments?
I'd like to speak to that a little bit too, because I'm a native Northeast Ohio person, and my family has been here for a long time. This is an area that actually has been innovative for over 100 years. And innovative in manufacturing, innovative in design, and it shows up in the fact that we've got this network of companies that are all doing really kind of key and important things. You know, and to me, it's fascinating. When I was growing up, you could go anywhere in the world and walk into a room and go, "That was made in Cleveland, Ohio," or "That came out of Cleveland, Ohio." And I really think that we're on the verge of that second manufacturing renaissance here. And a lot of it actually has to do with the fact that there is this idea of innovative and creative thinking around how you handle processes and how you do things. So we learn from each other a lot. So there's really a fantastic network already in place here. Other places in the country don't have it yet. They're trying to set it up, but it's going to take a long time for that to happen in places like South Carolina where the weather's better. But you know, they don't have the network and the history that people can pull on.
Let me comment on the network. You think about the rejuvenation of how Cleveland has remade itself. The network is powerful for the commercialization associates. So last, I think it was Thursday, someone had referred a pediatrician to me, and the pediatrician is, he's well respected, but he's burnt out. And he's like, you know, I've been dealing with these situations for 20 some odd years. It's time for a change. And somebody said, well, call Colin. And so we got together over at the hospital, and I said, well, what do you want to do? And he says, I don't know. He says, I have some ideas. So I said, well, you know, there's BioEnterprise, Blackstone Launchpad, Cleveland Clinic, got this, got that. Do you want to be a consultant? And so, so he says, well, I think I might want to be an investor. I said, okay. So I hooked him up with Clay Rankin, you know, and so, you know, we have this network of people where, and so Clay responded within half an hour and said, guess what? We're having an event. Why don't you come by? You'll be my guest. So I think it's a cultural. So you have to go to the different places, and you know, this culture isn't for everybody. The things we do here aren't really for everyone, but I think there's a cohort that flourishes in it. Yes, please.
Many investors tend to shy away from engineers because they think that engineers lack the financial intelligence. What's your advice when approaching an investor and try to promote or sell an idea to him?
Oh, you know, my experience was that and this is something Sunniva talked about and Rob alluded to as well. I think that if you view you know, remember the investor invests in management. They don't invest in the technology. And I think that if you don't have the team, they can smell that a mile away. Because I remember one day, it was actually David Morgenthaler, we had a conversation, and they said, you know, you keep investing a lot of money. You don't, in large sums of money. You don't seem to want to help the small investor. And he goes, that's not true at all. He says, I don't delight in spending 10 million if in fact the same success could be accomplished with 10,000. He said, but the problem is the team. The problem is the management. So even in my own case, when I started 2 companies and a consulting practice, and it always came back to the same thing over and over again. I had to have the self-awareness to say, I don't have those competencies. I need X. I need to network and get that team. It's the team. The last team I had for our molecular marker company, it was like, wow, it really took off. I was like so excited. And I remember, those people weren't my best friends. That's another mistake, you know? It's really complementary skills and competencies. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think so. I'm going back to the previous question, but why Cleveland? I mean, just look at the headquarters in the Cleveland area or nearby. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you could, go to almost any industry, and to your point, major players in the area, if not numerous ones. And the innovation, I mean, when you really peel the onion back and look at it, it's bubbling, and you may not realize it. And I think that's an opportunity probably for MEMs as well, is to get more involved, to really take networking seriously, to learn how, I mean, it's an art, I mean, it's an art, and it's a self-awareness of what's around you to, I mean, your question in terms of the finances and stuff, I mean, the fact you're at Case Western Reserve University, almost every expertise is here.
And,
So it's that networking within Case, right? Not only outside, but internally, and saying, wow, who's really good at this one thing? I need to find them. And then to put your team together.
But this ability to navigate in your career. So people say, they look at my resume and they say, oh, you've all done all these different things. I can't make sense of your career. And I'm like, it makes total sense to me. My passion from number one has been the ability to clarify issues in complex systems. So I came to Cleveland in 1985. I worked for NASA Lewis Research Center. I did tip clearance stall modeling on gas turbine engines. I mean, I wrote code, and I did all kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, that utility war, and I was like, I don't want to just do the research. I want to go into manufacturing. I went to Nordson, traveled the world. I mean, I never, in 25 years of being here, I've never had to move my house ever. So but the key is not to be, it's not like you jump around, but what is the core competency you're trying to build? And that's you have to know that yourself and be comfortable with it.
I want to add a little something to the question too, which is that basically engineering and business are two sides of the same coin. You can't really have one and hope to succeed without having the other. And they're very complementary. You can't make engineering decisions without understanding how it's going to affect a business. So, I mean, that's always a good point to keep in mind, is that what we're really talking about here in the long run is making money. And, and then basically what we do is we build the community at the same time.
Other questions? I don't know how we're doing on time.
One more last question.
Okay, sure.
Continuing with the discussion on finance, more related to the MEM program, I'm an engineer, and I am very interested in acquiring those skills that I am going to need to progress my career in a company, more business skills. So the financial, I guess, the more weatherhead side of the program, could you guys elaborate on how you guys teach those courses? Yeah. Do you kind of just throw us in?
As somebody who taught finance, let me explain, okay? So we have people with a variety of different backgrounds. Some of the MEMs come with extensive business minors in finance. Excuse me. So we have a course that's taught every summer. It's the 410 course. It's actually finance, accounting, and engineering economics. So it's all rolled up together. It's a very intense 8-week course. You get a lot out of it. There's a lot of self-realization. There's a lot of understanding of what you don't know. So if you have no prior experience, this will set the stage for so you become a good user of financial information, even though you don't do the accounting yourself. So you become. What I wait for, quite frankly, is for the fall to set in and the creative frustration. So we can, excuse me, I think you were talking about extrinsically. We can extrinsically say, do. But until you personally feel the frustration. So when I run my pro forma seminars on Saturday afternoons, I have 15, 20 people who are like, oh crap, I didn't listen in the summer. Now I need to know. So we go through it. We do it iteratively. So it's a mix of formal and informal. No question. I would be misrepresenting to say that if you take the finance, engineering economics, and the accounting course, that does not give you the full suite of skills. And we've had this discussion with the Weatherhead School that you might need to take some additional courses. Some people do. But it is enough for you to have the conversation in conjunction with what's done in product development, Six Sigma, and in entrepreneurship. We kind of go through those. So we pick it up iteratively, And most people learn it because they're like, I really need to know this. So I have the workshops in the fall and the spring, actually. We got another one coming up. So not perfect, but in a condensed format, it gets you there. And Ramona is demanding that be the last question, if I understand.
No, I'm not demanding.
Oh, yes, you are. I hear you. I hear you.
Thank you all. So everyone, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for the folks online, and of course, thank you to our wonderful faculty. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to ask me, or you're welcome to stop by anytime tomorrow, Nord Hall, room 305, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks again, and have a great evening.